The moment the knee landed, the crowd, whether live or watching from screens across the world, knew it was over. That split-second collision of bone against flesh, the unmistakable sound of a perfectly placed strike, sent shockwaves through the octagon. Alicia Zaleski dos Santos barely had time to process what had happened before his body gave in to the sheer force of Chidi and Njokuani's devastating clinch attack. It wasn't just a knee. It was a statement. A moment of calculated destruction that sent a clear message to the entire division. Njokuani is not here to play. He's here to dominate. This was UFC Fight Night 254. And what happened inside the octagon that night was more than just a fight. It was a career-defining performance, a showcase of skill, power, and the kind of violence that makes the UFC the ultimate proving ground. But before we break down the masterful execution that led to this stunning finish, let me ask you something. Have you ever witnessed a moment so perfectly timed that it felt like destiny? A moment where everything slows down, where the raw intensity of combat is distilled into a single strike that changes everything? That's exactly what happened in Las Vegas, at the UFC Apex, where Chidi and Njokuani delivered one of the most brutal finishes of his career. And you, my friend, are about to experience every second of it. From the opening bell, it was clear that this wasn't going to be a slow, drawn-out chess match. Both fighters had come prepared to throw down, each possessing the kind of striking arsenal that could end the fight at any moment. Njokuani, long and rangy, moved with a quiet confidence, measuring his opponent with calculated steps. Zaleski dos Santos, a veteran of wars inside the octagon, was equally dangerous, carrying a reputation for explosive unpredictability. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes you lean in just a little closer, knowing something violent is about to unfold. The first round was a battle of patience and precision. Njokuani, despite missing weight before the fight, didn't show any signs of being slowed down. He snapped crisp kicks at Zaleski's legs, testing his movement, forcing him to react. But Zaleski wasn't simply standing still. He was waiting, reading, looking for an opening of his own. The exchanges were sharp, clean, a showcase of striking mastery from both men. Every feint, every slip of the head, every calculated movement was a reminder of just how high the stakes were. But fights like these don't stay measured for long. The energy inside the cage was building, simmering like a pot ready to boil over. And then, in the second round, it happened. The moment that would be played on highlight reels for years to come. Njokuani closed the distance, locking Zaleski in the clinch. It was a position that could have gone either way. Fighters break from the clinch all the time, resetting to strike. But Njokuani had other plans. With the precision of a surgeon and the raw power of a wrecking ball, he lifted his knee straight into Zaleski's chin. A perfect strike. A knee so brutal, so flawlessly placed, that there was no coming back from it. Zaleski's body stiffened for a fraction of a second before crumbling to the mat. Njokuani didn't hesitate. He pounced, landing a barrage of strikes on the ground, making absolutely certain that the fight was finished. The referee rushed in, waving it off at the 2:19 mark of round 2. And just like that, it was over. The crowd erupted. The commentary team, barely able to contain their shock, exploded with excitement. This was the kind of finish that makes you remember exactly why you love this sport. But here's the thing, while the victory was undeniable, there was still a lingering detail that complicated the moment. Njokuani had missed weight for this fight, which meant that despite the spectacular finish, he was ineligible for a performance bonus. A frustrating reality, no doubt, but one that didn't seem to faze him much. Because while he might not be walking away with an extra check, he was walking away with something even more valuable: momentum. 3 wins in a row. A dominant performance on a high-profile stage. And a post-fight interview that made one thing clear: Njokuani is ready for the next step. When he took the mic, he didn't waste time with pleasantries. He called for a top 15 matchup. He wasn't asking. He was demanding. And after a finish like that, it's hard to argue against him. But what happens next? What doors does this victory open for Njokuani? And most importantly, who will step up to face him now that he's made it clear he's ready for bigger challenges? There's still more to this story, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. If you think what you just witnessed was intense, wait until you see what's coming next. Because the road to the top is only getting more dangerous from here. Do you want to know what comes next? Stay with me, because you're about to find out. The moment the referee waved off the fight, Njokuani rose to his feet, his body still coiled with the energy of battle. He paced the cage, his breath heavy but controlled, his eyes scanning the roaring crowd. The knockout had been clean, ruthless, the kind of finish that sent a message to every fighter in the division. He knew exactly what he had just done. He had put himself on the map in a way that no one could ignore. But in the back of his mind, he was aware of the one thing that still loomed over this moment: the weight miss. It was an unfortunate blemish on an otherwise perfect night. A misstep that meant he wouldn't be taking home the performance bonus that his finish undoubtedly deserved. But if anyone thought that would dull the significance of this victory, they were wrong. Because the bonus was just money. And money comes and goes. What really mattered, the thing that couldn't be taken away, was the momentum he had just built. As he stood in the center of the octagon, his face still glistening with sweat, the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. The official decision was read, his hand was raised, and the crowd responded with a mix of awe and admiration. Some cheered wildly, others simply nodded, taking in what they had just witnessed. Because when a fighter delivers a finish like that, it's impossible not to acknowledge their talent. Njokuani took the mic for his post-fight interview, and he didn't waste time with modesty. He wasn't here to celebrate the past. He was here to carve out his future. "I want a top 15 fight next," he said, his voice steady, unwavering. "It's time." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. And the way he had just performed, it was one that couldn't be ignored. Backstage, the energy was electric. Fighters, coaches, and UFC officials had seen what happened inside that cage, and the ripple effect was already spreading. Conversations were being had, names were being thrown around. Who would be next? Who in the top 15 would be willing to step into the cage with a fighter who had just showcased such deadly precision? The MMA world thrives on moments like this, moments that spark debates, discussions, speculation. Fans flooded social media, their fingers furiously typing out reactions. Some were already calling for dream matchups. Others were dissecting Njokuani's performance, analyzing his striking, his power, the lethal efficiency of his clinch work. But one question overshadowed them all: what comes next? Njokuani's name was now in the conversation, but the fight game is as ruthless as the fighters who compete in it. Today's highlight reel star can quickly become tomorrow's forgotten name. He needed to keep this momentum going, and that meant securing a fight that would push him up the rankings. His call out for a top 15 opponent wasn't just talk. It was strategy. He knew that in the UFC, timing is everything. You don't just wait for opportunities, you create them. And right now, with all eyes on him, This was his moment to strike. Behind the scenes, matchmakers were already considering their options. The UFC's middleweight division was stacked with killers, but there were always openings. Injuries, scheduling conflicts, fighters looking for a quick turnaround, and Njokuani just needed the right name at the right time. And after a performance like this, the right name would come. But before that, there was something else he needed to deal with. The weight miss. Missing weight in the UFC isn't just about numbers on a scale. It's about professionalism, discipline, and respect for the sport. Fighters are expected to come in on target, and when they don't, it raises questions. Was it a one-time mistake? A bad weight cut? Or was it something deeper? Njokuani knew the narrative that could form if he wasn't careful. He had just delivered one of the most impressive performances of his career, but if people started focusing on the weight miss instead of the knockout, that could damage his momentum. He needed to get ahead of it. In the post-fight press conference, reporters wasted no time asking about it. Chidi, amazing performance tonight. But obviously, you missed weight before the fight. Can you talk about what happened there? Njokuani nodded, his expression serious. Yeah, man. I take full responsibility for that. No excuses. I messed up. But trust me, it won't happen again. His answer was direct. No dodging, no deflecting. And in a sport where fighters are constantly scrutinized, honesty goes a long way. The UFC brass would take note of that. They don't look kindly on repeat offenders when it comes to weight issues, but they do respect fighters who own up to their mistakes. And for Njokuani, that was the key: acknowledge it, fix it, and move forward. As the night wound down, he could finally breathe. The fight was over. The job was done. But in many ways, this was just the beginning. The real battle wasn't just inside the cage. It was in staying relevant, in climbing the ranks, in making sure this win wasn't just a moment, but a stepping stone to something greater. He had the talent. He had the power. He had the highlight reel. Now, all he needed was the right fight. And if the UFC was watching closely, and they always are, they knew exactly what to do next. The question now was, who would step up? Who would be the next name across from Chidi and Njokuani when he walked into that octagon again? Because after a finish like that, one thing was certain: whoever it was, they were in for a war.